I'm just going to say it. The Empire Strikes Back is an absolute mess. At least that's what you'd think if you looked at it through the lens of a modern Hollywood blockbuster. It is a sequel where the heroes lose everything. The protagonist gets his hand chopped off by his own father, and the movie ends on a literal cliffhanger with no resolution. By today's formula standards, this movie should have been a disaster. But for 46 years, we've been told that this is the gold standard, the masterpiece. But in 2026, when every franchise is desperately trying to be the next Empire, have we actually stopped to ask why? Is it just nostalgia? Is it the lightsabers and John Williams' score? Or is there something much darker and something much older buried beneath the snow of Hoth? And today, we are going to find out if it's actually a masterpiece or if we've all just been blinded by the Force for 4 decades. Let's dive in. One of the reasons that Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back still feels so fresh, despite being a direct sequel, is because George Lucas understood something that Hollywood still struggles with today. A sequel shouldn't simply give audiences more of what they loved. It should challenge what they thought they knew about the film. Now that may sound absolutely insane, but hear me out. Rather than repeating A New Hope, Lucas inverted it. From the very first scene, this feels like a completely different film. A New Hope opens with perhaps the most iconic image in cinema history. A tiny rebel ship races across the galaxy before an impossibly vast Imperial Star Destroyer slowly consumes the screen. Before a single character speaks, we understand the conflict. It's the little man versus the world. Freedom versus tyranny. Hope versus oppression. It is immediate. It is loud and exciting and bombastic. And yet The Empire Strikes Back does the opposite. It slows everything down. Instead of beginning with a battle, it begins with silence. Instead of an attack, it begins with a search. The Emperor isn't conquering, they are hunting. Probe droids drift across the galaxy like predators sniffing out wounded prey. This war has changed at this point with this film. The rebels aren't leading a revolution anymore, they're surviving one. And that inversion does not stop there. A New Hope builds towards the rebels' greatest victory. Empire opens up with one of their greatest defeats. The climatic battle of the first film takes place in an endless blackness of space. The opening battle here unfolds across an endless white wasteland, where one ends in triumph, the other begins in catastrophe. Everything is upside down with this film, and it wasn't accidental, because that inversion is the point of the whole movie. It is foreshadowing how the protagonist, Luke Skywalker, his entire understanding of the galaxy is about to be turned upside down as well. And it's no coincidence how this film actually reinforces that idea visually. Luke hangs helplessly upside down in the Wampa's cave. Later, he's suspended beneath Cloud City after his duel with Vader. Even on Dagobah, Yoda constantly forces Luke to look at the world from a completely different perspective. George Lucas keeps returning to this image because it reflects what's happening inside Luke's mind. At the end of A New Hope, Luke thinks he understands the world. He's a big hero. He saved the day from the evil Empire and the rebels are good. Obi-Wan told him everything he needs to know, etc. But The Empire Strikes Back systematically dismantles every single one of those assumptions. His mentor withheld the truth from him. He gets his ass handed to him by Darth Vader, and perhaps most devastating of all, the second greatest monster in the galaxy turns out to have shagged his mum. What an absolute nightmare. By the end of this film, Luke hasn't just simply lost his hand, he's lost that certainty. Everything he believed about himself, about the Jedi, about good and evil has been shaken to its core, and that's what I find so fascinating about this film. It isn't just trying to make Luke stronger, it's trying to make him wiser, and wisdom almost always begins the same way, by discovering that the world is far more complicated than you first believed. And no clearer is this than seen with the introduction of Yoda, who has always been one of my favourite Star Wars characters. I've always thought people misunderstood the Dagobah scenes. They're often remembered as the point where Luke learns his Jedi powers, but I don't think that's really what they're about. Yoda never actually teaches Luke how to move rocks, he teaches him how to think. Luke arrives in Dagobah believing becoming a Jedi is all about acquiring power. He wants shortcuts, he wants mastery, he wants to become something stronger as quickly as possible, because like most young lads, he still believes wisdom is something you can just simply learn. Yet my boy Yoda knows different. After nearly 9 centuries, witnessing the rise and fall of the Jedi Order and watching the Republic collapse into tyranny, he understands that wisdom isn't something you acquire overnight. It's something life painfully gives you. And man, we could totally get into how Yoda is only wise in the original trilogy because of the mistakes he made and how he mishandled the Jedi Order in the prequels. But for now, let's take a look at one of the greatest exchanges ever written in film.
I don't believe it.
That is why you fail.
I genuinely think that this single line is the greatest Star Wars moment because it implies to almost every challenge we will ever face as humans. People often think confidence comes after success. You fake it till you make it kind of thing. Yoda argues exactly the opposite. The belief should come first. Before Luke even attempts to lift the X-Wing, he's already convinced himself that it cannot be done.
Master, moving stones around is one thing. This is totally different.
No different. Only different in your mind.
His failure is not physical, it's psychological, and that's why I don't think the Force is really magic. George Lucas has always described it as more of a philosophy than a superpower, a way of living in harmony with the universe. Yoda never tells Luke to dominate the Force, he tells him to trust it, to become part of it.
Life creates it, makes it grow.
Everything is connected. The Jedi don't conquer nature, they participate within it. Think about how different that is from the Sith. The Jedi believe power comes from connection and harmony, whereas the Sith are more selfish and believe that power comes from domination. One philosophy says that life gives you strength, the other says the strength gives you the right to rule life itself. And that's why the Force in Star Wars isn't just this superpower system, it's two completely different worldviews. The Jedi and Sith are two vastly different religions. And I saw George compare the dark side once to drugs. It's quicker, it's easier, it gives you immediate power, but every time you choose that easier path, it takes a little more of you in return, until eventually that power saps and begins using you, not the other way around. And nobody embodies the opposite of that better than Yoda himself, because this is a man who has lost everything. He watched the Jedi fall. He watched democracy collapse. He has lost countless friends. He failed to stop Sidious. He spent 2 decades in exile. Yet somehow he never became bitter. Unlike Obi-Wan, who carries the guilt of Anakin's fall almost like a wound that never heals, Yoda chooses something different. Acceptance. Because, what else are you going to do? But he retreats to Dagobah, a planet seeped in the dark side itself, not to hide from failure, but to live alongside it without allowing it to consume him. I think that's an incredibly Buddhist idea. He doesn't eliminate darkness, he just learns to exist without letting it control him. And Luke is not ready for that lesson at the start of this film. He's still impatient, impulsive, still convinced that becoming a Jedi means becoming powerful. Yoda knows that becoming a Jedi means becoming humble.
A Jedi must have the deepest commitment, the most serious mind.
That's why Luke keeps repeating Anakin's mistakes. Both of them wanted strength and power, and neither understood wisdom. There is an old saying that the master has failed more times than the student has even tried, but Luke does not realize that yet. Yoda is not wise because he never failed, he's wise because he survived failure without allowing it to define him. And I think that's what this scene is all about. Yoda is not teaching Luke how to move an X-Wing, he's teaching him how to move himself, and I think that's why this scene still resonates almost half a century later. And I feel Luke's character arc is the most underappreciated aspects of the original trilogy. On the surface, it almost sounds cliched in that you've seen it a billion times before. A farm boy dreams of something greater, he leaves home, he discovers he's destined for something extraordinary, and he sets out to become a hero. But George Lucas was never simply telling a science fiction story, he was telling a modern day fairy tale. That's one of the reasons Star Wars has endured for nearly 50 years. Lucas borrowed from mythology, Arthurian legend, Kurosawa's samurai films, Flash Gordon serials, and Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey. By going back to past stories, Lucas created something oddly timeless. Fairy tales were never about dragons or magic. They were moral stories to guide children, with some about becoming the kind of person capable of facing dragons and magic. That's exactly what Luke is learning in The Empire Strikes Back. But what's fascinating here is that Luke spends almost the entire film repeating his father's mistakes. Like Anakin before him, he's impatient, he's driven by emotion, he's ruled by attachment. The moment he has visions of his friends in danger, he abandons his training because he believes only he can save them. It comes from compassion, but so did Anakin's fall. And Aristotle argued that character is formed through habit. We become what we repeatedly choose to do. This is seen with how Luke isn't destined to become Darth Vader simply because the Skywalker bloodline is tainted, which is something Palpatine believes, I think. No, he becomes Vader only if he keeps making Vader's choices. That's why the cave on Dagobah is one of my favourite scenes in the entire saga. Luke enters it expecting to fight who he perceives as Darth Vader. Instead, he fights himself. He strikes Vader down only to discover his own face staring back at him through that shattered mask. It's one of the most elegant pieces of visual storytelling that George Lucas ever wrote. The dark side isn't waiting somewhere out in the galaxy. It's waiting inside Luke himself, waiting for every impatient, impulsive decision, every fearful choice, every act defined by anger instead of wisdom. And that's what makes Darth Vader such a tragic character. Because one of my favourite moments in all of Star Wars comes from the Obi-Wan show, when Vader quietly says,
Anakin's gone. I'm what remains.
Hayden Christensen's delivery of that absolutely breaks my heart, because Vader genuinely believes it at that point. He doesn't see himself as Anakin Skywalker anymore. He sees Anakin as a weak man who failed, that hopeful young Jedi who loved too much, the husband who couldn't save his wife, the friend who betrayed everyone he cared about, and so he buries him deep down. He convinces himself that Darth Vader killed Anakin Skywalker, but that's the tragedy. Anakin didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because every fearful choice slowly became a habit, until eventually there was nothing left except Vader. And now Luke is standing at exactly that same crossroad. The difference is that Luke still has a choice, and The Empire Strikes Back is the story of him slowly realizing that becoming a Jedi isn't about physically defeating Darth Vader, it's about refusing to become him. And that then brings us to perhaps the greatest plot twist in all of cinema history. People often talk about this scene because it's shocking, and yes, absolutely is. And I love watching dads show their kids this and seeing their reactions. But for me, I think it's so impactful because it completely changes what this film and the saga is about. Up until this moment, Luke believes evil is something external, something you can overcome and destroy. Then in a single sentence,
I am your father.
George Lucas transforms a space opera into something far more philosophical, because suddenly evil isn't standing opposite Luke, it is in his blood. That question is no longer, can Luke defeat Darth Vader? It's, if the greatest monster in the galaxy is my father, and I'm following his impulsive nature, what does that make me? Where am I headed? That's such an existential question. It reframes his entire identity. And that's why this review has endured for nearly half a century. Luke isn't horrified simply because Vader is his father. He's horrified because, for the first time, he sees himself in Vader. Everything Yoda warned him about suddenly makes sense. That quick path, that easy path, the fear, the attachment, the impulsiveness. Luke realizes he hasn't been walking away from Vader. He's been headed toward him the whole time. The cave on Dagobah wasn't showing Luke who Vader was. It was showing him who he could become. So when Vader reaches out for his hand and says, "Join me," Luke finally becomes wise when he makes the single most important decision of his life. He lets go. Literally. Rather than take the easier path, rather than embrace the power that comes with the dark side, rather than become another Darth Vader, Luke throws himself into the abyss. It is such an incredible piece of visual storytelling, because by falling, he rises above his father. Anakin couldn't let go, but Luke could. And that's the difference between them. And what is really cool is how Luke's character arc actually stops Vader's character arc in its tracks, because Vader in this film is a completely different man to how he was in A New Hope. Everyone thinks he becomes Anakin again in Return of the Jedi, but here in Empire, Anakin is slowly swimming back to the surface for the first time in 20 years. When I rewatched this film for this review, I noticed this blink and you miss it line.
That is the system, and I'm sure Skywalker is with them.
Did you catch that? I'm sure Skywalker is with them. Now, this scene is only 20 minutes into the film, a good 30 minutes before when Palpatine tells Vader that Anakin had a son. And I was like, what? Until I clocked that Vader worked out that he had a son sometime between the two films. And that reframes everything about Vader from the get-go of this film. He isn't after Luke to hunt him down for destroying the Death Star. No, he's hunting him down for a selfish reason. He's actively working against the Emperor in secret because he knows Luke's powerful. He sensed it in the trench run.
The Force is strong with this one.
And he needs Luke to help him take down the Emperor. That's why the duel in this movie works so well. Not only does it look so beautiful with the colours, it works thematically as well. This whole time, Vader has been luring Luke into a trap, and it's a test. Vader is never going to kill his son in combat. He wants to see him fight, see his power firsthand, test him. And I think that's why Vader is so fascinating in this film. For the first time, we begin to see cracks in the armor. The film even shows him unmasked a little, not too much, but a little tease, which is a visual metaphor. We are seeing him vulnerable, like the light that's slowly coming back to him. When Luke escapes, Vader doesn't explode with rage. He doesn't choke another officer. He doesn't blame anyone else. He simply lowers his head and walks away in shame. It's such a small moment, but it completely changes how we see him. For the first time, Darth Vader stops feeling like an unstoppable monster and reframed as a father who's just lost his only son. Even the original 1980 line of
Bring my shuttle
carries far more emotion than the latest special edition dialogue. He's so defeated, not because Luke escaped, but because Luke rejected him, and that's the tragedy of Darth Vader. How he spent decades believing Anakin Skywalker was dead, then he finally finds the one person who could bring him back, and he watches him disappear into the abyss instead. The Empire Strikes Back never leaves you in despair, because Luke triumphed. He rejected the path that he was on. He rejected becoming like his father. And it's so powerful because this film even strips away his plot armor.
That boy is our last hope.
No, there is another.
In a single line, the film removes any sense of narrative safety. Luke is not protected by destiny. He can fail, he can fall. The universe would just continue on regardless. But his choice to reject his father is the most important aspect of this film. And that's why Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back still resonates over 46 years later. It isn't really about rebels or empires or lightsabers. You could strip all that away and the story would still hold. Because at its core, it's about the hardest battle anyone ever faces. Not the darkness out there, but the darkness within. And unlike Anakin, Luke chooses differently. Hey, if you're still here, I just wanted to say thank you. I've officially set up channel memberships for those of you who want to support the deep dives and the live streams. It's £3 a month, and honestly, it goes a long way in helping me keep the lights on and the videos coming. I know things are astronomically expensive for everyone right now, so please only join if you're in a position to do so. But if there are any like Bruce Waynes watching who want to help build this multiversal library with me, I would be forever grateful. And as always, thank you for watching my video. Live long and prosper.